Hello, everybody. Well, hello, beautiful people. We are here with another episode of People Always Ask. This edition is pretty straightforward. It's just because people always ask how to find a therapist and how to pay for therapy while we're at it. And that is exactly what we're going to explore in this very episode today. So if you've been thinking about getting a therapist, even a virtual therapist, I'm about to throw down some information about how to find it, how to pay for it, and where you can really go to make sure that you're finding somebody good. So I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about how to know if you found a therapist that's actually someone you should stick with, and how you'd know even by looking at their profile maybe, right? So anyway, welcome. Let's talk about how to find a therapist. So first of all, people are always like, which one's better? What is a therapist? So let's just break down what type of therapists even exist out there. So you might see this, a psychologist, might be a PhD, a PsyD. This is somebody who's licensed in clinical psychology. That means they have a doctoral degree in psychology. It also means that they have a doctorate, right? So that sometimes they can prescribe medication. You might see this. It's a training program. You can look it up. They might have an orientation. They might say what they do exactly, but this is what a PhD or a PsyD is. Social workers, the difference between this, why it says social, is because social work is about both learning about the community and systems and learning about working with people individually. So if you have a social worker like me, then that means that they've learned about both systems of oppression, systems in the country, systems that affect individuals and families, and they're oriented towards helping people individually and through a community lens to get better. At least ideally, that's what their school is supposed to be prepping them for. Then you've got MFT, which just stands for marriage. I said marriage and family therapist. So this person is going to specialize in marriage, couples, family therapy. So if you're looking for that in particular, this might be right up your alley, right? Then, of course, we've all seen this. It's a psychiatrist. Now, be careful with psychiatrists because some psychiatrists mostly prescribe medication. What they're really good for is people who are looking for medication management, people who know that that's what they need. This is not necessarily therapy. This might be a 20-minute, 15-minute in and out. What do you need? What do you want? What are you looking for kind of appointment? They might actually be kind of cold and disconnected. So you got to be careful. If you're looking for somebody who is a talk therapist and not a medical doctor, then this is not that. You see MD, DO, both of those things have the word doctor in them because it's actually mostly about chemical balances and behavioral stuff having to do with medication. So just want to let y'all know what the possibilities were. You got MFT, LCSW, MSW, PsyD, PhD, DO, MD. All of those are in the field of therapists, and some psychiatrists do both. So where could you go to find help? This is the actual answer to the question, guys. So the first place you can go is there's actually a lot of nonprofits that offer therapy. So if you're in a particular community that's vulnerable, this might be particularly true. So if you're, for example, a Latina woman, you would be able to look up community-based organizations, mental health clinic, right? Same thing for people who are in the LGBTQIA community. There's therapists who specifically get funding to provide therapy in clinics that are nonprofit based. So that means that you're not going to have to pay for services, or you're going to be able to pay for services through a third party who's paying for you. That's always nice. So if you have a community organization in your area that provides therapy, so like an example in New York City would be the Audre Lorde Foundation, right? So they provide free counseling and psych evaluations for people who are in the LGBT community, right? And so the same thing goes for the center. Also, there's somewhere named The Door in New York City, which is for youth, and they can get free therapy at that resource. So if you know somebody who's under the age of 24, I actually want to say, they can get therapy for free through The Door, which is an organization that has a location up in the Bronx and downtown in New York City. And there are orgs like this all over the country. So please, wherever you are, take a look at the top mental health providers who are nonprofits in your area, because there are tons of free programming in terms of trying to make sure that people who need therapy get therapy, and people just oftentimes don't know about them, right? It may not come up on the first page of your Google search, so go in a couple of pages, right? And also make sure that you're doing things like asking schools and community-based organizations that you trust about where they might be sending people. Another place in your community that offers therapy, whether you know it or not, is colleges and universities. So if you're enrolled in school, there is a pretty large chance that if you're on their healthcare, you could get therapy for free right now. And so that's including graduate students. That also includes people who are staff and employees of the university. So this is always going to be a place. I can't guarantee at either of these places how your therapist is going to be, but that's almost always true, right? So it's always going to be an individual relationship you're building with your therapist, but this is the second place where you can go. All right, so what if you can't find a nonprofit? What if you're not in a university or college? That's most of us, to be honest with you. So let's go through the basic places. We got psychologytodaycom. That's where I'm listed. That's where a bunch of people are listed. I'll tell you why. I'll give you the secret as to why this is actually a really good resource. When you fill out the form that they require you to fill out to take insurance plans, you get a free subscription to Psychology Today for 6 months. So that means people who are just onboarding with companies and starting making their profile, they're usually going to use this resource for 6 months and beyond that, which makes a lot of providers get on this site. So it doesn't mean that everybody on here is created equal. What's good about it, though, is they have filters for what type of therapy you want, what type of population or area you'd like for them to be serving. And on top of that, you can kind of see pictures and a little description of how they describe themselves. And we can get into a little bit later when you see those little descriptions, how you would know what to look for to make sure it's actually the kind of place you want to walk into. Now, if we're looking for low cost therapy guaranteed, right, there's something called openpathcollective.org. Every single person listed on this site has therapy sessions between $30 and $60. Every single person listed on this site. So if you're trying to do something on a budget and you really, really, really want to make sure that you're not spending over $60 on a session, everybody here is guaranteed to be within that rate. And it is all over the country. There's some more places than others. That's why we're listing more than one resource here for you. I'm trying to aggregate it all together. Put them in the comments if you know somewhere good other than these places we're listing. But OpenPath, $30 to $60 per session, right? And so that is a good resource for people who are trying and can't find somebody under their insurance or can't find somebody affordable. Go over here and see if you can find someone. Another source, therapyforblackmen.org. I struggle with this website because there's not a ton of people listed, but there is a target here. And I'm sorry, y'all, I serve communities of color and primarily Black people. So a lot of these are going to be targeted towards those folks, especially when we're talking about specific resources. So therapyforblackmen.org is a resource where everybody is dedicated to serving and specializing in working with Black males, youth included. And that's not just to say that there are Black male providers, but there is a difference between somebody who looks like you and people who are oriented towards serving you, because they can look like a lot of things and maybe they still cool people, right? And so we want to make sure that you're getting the experience you want, no matter what color the therapist is. But really, there's some research that shows maybe it's easier to have therapy with people who kind of look more like you and represent your group. But that's a discussion for a different day. Then we got Therapy for Black Girls, kind of the same thing, reverse side of the coin. This website comes with a podcast, and it is actually a pretty good podcast. But on top of that, Therapy for Black Girls has a lot of listings. So it is another place where the directory is pretty thorough. And so if you want to go over to therapyforblackgirls.com on your other tab real quick and see what it looks like, it's actually pretty intuitive. You can search the search bar. There's also articles in there for self-help. They have a podcast to listen to in case you don't find a therapist in your area that you like, where it gives you really good advice to download if you need it. Now, outside of these places, if you want to do some virtual therapy, because we're in the quarantine right now, I don't know how many people taking clients that way. There's also a website that's run by Black Emotional and Mental Health Coalition called beam.community. And if you go to this website here, beam.community/BVTNNJ, what it is it's resources for people to get funding for and connected to resources. There's a directory on there for virtual therapy. So if you are looking for a virtual therapist to connect with via video, this is the resource for you. We're talking Beam. So this is obviously centered on Black folks healing. But on Psychology Today, they also sort of list whether or not people are available for video and virtual sessions. And usually these days during the pandemic, they are covered by your insurance if you had it. Okay, so that's kind of the resource portion of this. It always does not hurt to ask people too. So word of mouth is not a bad place to start, especially when it comes to the community-based organizations. So let's go to the what to look for. So we got all these good resources, right? You might go to Psychology Today, Therapy for Black Men. You might go to Beam. And if you're there, what I want you to be able to see for yourself, right, is what it is that you should be looking for. If you go into a page or directory or even a first session with somebody and you're trying to figure out, like, is this a good person for me? So the key things here, and this is the last no, after this, you know, you will be well equipped to go into the world and find yourself both funding and therapy. But we'll get into some of the resources to get some funding all the way at the end of this episode, because trust me, I know some of y'all are like, where can I get free? You said free therapy. So first I want to make sure before you jump on this funding, you know who to look for. Okay. So one, you do not, and I repeat, you do not, especially if you belong to any group that has the desire to seek some sort of foundation in who you are, is you do not want to hook up with a therapist that pretends to be apolitical and neutral. That's a lie. That's a bold-faced lie that anybody's walking as a blank slate. People have thoughts and opinions about how you are showing up, about what is the right way to heal. You need to be clear in their profile. Are they being clear about really what they think as a person who's giving you therapy? Are they being clear about their orientation? If somebody pretends to have no orientation, I'm colorblind, that could be potentially dangerous for people who are living in very real systems with very political issues. And so for you, if you're somebody who really knows that you do not want to walk into a space where you're feeling stereotyped, where you're feeling like this is just not landing, I don't know what it is, my culture is not even being considered when we're thinking about why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, that's not going to be a good look. So the other part of this is the logical next part is that you need to feel understood and not shamed or stereotyped. So if there's something happening where you're starting to be shamed and it's something that you know is quite common in your culture to experience, it's also something if you're being told, hey, you're angry and maybe you just need to adjust to a situation that is otherwise oppressive. That is not a good therapist for you. That is not a way of actually living full, right? And if we go to a model of either trauma or liberation or anything like that, what our goal of therapy is not to just show up as the part of you that can adjust to society, but that you can show up as the authentic version of you and feel good about that. And so we want to make sure that wherever you are, the real version of you feels understood and it does not feel like there's some stereotypes coming in. So something ridiculous that happens in therapy to people is people will assume that Black people are born into poor, struggling circumstances without asking any questions, or that you don't have a father without asking any questions. These are the kind of things that if they coming into the room, you're doing too much work already in your own therapy session. You're the expert on you. If somebody's stereotyping you and not giving you the space to feel understood, to explore who you are, then that's not going to be the right fit for you. Either they need to understand it because they get it, or they need to understand it because there's space to explain it, and hopefully both. So in their profile, what you also want to look at is the language that they use. Does it feel like they're talking up here? They're using a bunch of acronyms that you don't understand, a bunch of things that you don't really get? Well, ideally, the therapist that you're probably going to do best with is somebody that feels approachable to you and human and on the same level as you, right? It's not going to be somebody who feels like they're way over here and you're way below them and you're scared to tell them that you messed up the other week. Nah. Therapy requires honesty, reflection, vulnerability, some painful, uncomfortable moments. So you need to have a person in the room with you who's going to make you feel comfortable being human, being flawed, and also can see your strengths and make you feel comfortable that you're seen in that way too. It's not just all problem focused or deficit focused. It's a whole human being, right? And so you want to have a whole human being treating you. You don't want to just be in a person relationship where, yeah, exactly. I'm seeing Monica's comment here. They have to have a picture. They have to have the picture, right? And so ideally, what would be happening is that you're working to be the expert on you. That's what's happening in the room. And they're the expert on mental health in general, right? So they got in the journey, but they are not retelling you about who you actually are as a human being. They're giving you space to explore that on your own. So the last thing in this is that in their description, they're clear about who they serve. There is almost zero possibility that somebody has 7 specialties, that they serve children and adults and elders with trauma and anxiety and personality disorders and delusions, and they're treating somatic work, and they're doing Reiki, and there's very, 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 very unlikely that that person actually is a jack of all trades and an expert of all trades, right? So what you want to see is somebody who's defined really clearly for themselves, what do they do? So what I do is I work in a framework that aims to support people of color and Black people and Indigenous people, particularly Black and Indigenous people, support them through the process of being able to process trauma and anxiety. That's what I do, right? So if people are looking for me, they'll go, "Ooh, well, I do struggle with anxiety, and I think I've had some workplace oppression. This therapist might actually be the one for me." And so when people come in, we're talking, they getting exactly what they're expecting because I'm clear about who I serve. I have no qualms about saying that. And I'll have clients come into me who are white, like, "Is it okay that I'm white?" And I'm like, "Sure, as long as you understand that who I'm oriented towards, who I study for, who I try to sort of make sure that I can hold space for on my caseload, is not just so that white people feel comfortable." Right? I'm clear about that. It doesn't lose me any clients because realistically, people want to be clear about who they come in to see too. That is not a thing that is anything to be ashamed of. That's something that lets you know this person has a finger on what it is they're training in. They have a finger on who it is they need to consult with and who's in their community, right? And that means that when you go to see them, you can ask questions related to that kind of stuff, especially if it's something that you're interested in. So I promise you the last thing that we were going to do, right? Places to find therapy for free, for free. It's time for the therapy for free. And so blackmenheal.org actually has a fund that you can sign up for and donate to. It is located in Philly. So if you're in Philadelphia area right now and you're interested in some free therapy, you can go to blackmenheal.org. And if you want to donate to help Black men heal in Philadelphia, one of the cities that Trump is threatening to send in friggin' federal troops and Department of Homeland Security into, feel free to use the Cash app or to go to the PayPal and donate to them right now so more brothers can get therapy for free. A lot of y'all probably heard about your girl, Taraji. So these next ones are going to be for anybody, and you can find a therapist locally to you and they'll fund you, right? They'll send a check to your therapist. So this next one, we've heard Taraji B. Henson has the Boris Henson Foundation, which is centered on mental health in the Black community. And if you want to, and if you need to, you can go over to the website and join and apply to get funding for therapy. All you have to do is need therapy and be a person of color who would like it. And so you can go to the Boris Henson Foundation.org/resource guide, and right there on the page, right in front of you, is going to be both a place to donate, find some therapists, and for you to join if you are a therapist who wants to start receiving clients from them and getting payments. So I'm sort of also shouting this out for anybody who is a therapist who'd like to serve people and make sure that you're accessible to people who want therapy but can't afford it. You can go to that website too, and you can sign up as well. And that will help you become a provider so their list can get more extensive. I know the funding's been a little iffy on the payback end, but it is a great resource and a lot of people know about it. Similarly to this, there is the Loveland Foundation and the Loveland Therapy Fund. This is to fund therapy for people who need it. And so if you want to go over there and see if you qualify, you can apply for that too. They have different cohorts of people. So they have a winter cycle. It's sort of like applying to school. And you can apply for the cycle that is coming up that's still open. And also, there are a lot of therapists, and this is something that a lot of people don't really talk about, but if you are working with a therapist, I encourage you to be very open about the situation that you are in, because a lot of people offer what they call a sliding scale. And so a sliding scale, if you see that on a profile, just means that they're willing to lower their price based on what clients need. So for me, my full rate is more than what I can offer people if they let me know they'd like to they'd like to adjust, right? So I can start sessions. I charge one client $50 a session because realistically his situation is that where he is in high need. He has a lot of complex trauma, which I specialize in. I have space for clients who I can take that rate for, right? And I make sure that I keep my rate so I can do that. And on top of that, I'm really aware that there are not a lot of providers who are doing what I'm doing for people who are in his age group, who are his race, who need the things that he needs. So, always be willing to kind of be open about what you need. They're a therapist, for God's sake. And if they don't give you a compassionate response to that, then that's a red flag any damn way. So you can head over to the Boris H. Henson Foundation. Go to openpathcollective.org for some reduced fee therapists who are all over the country for everybody. You can go to blackmanheal.org. And if you need to get connected to some virtual therapy, there's also funding on Beam. And so one of the places in general for everybody to go that advocates for mental health needs and all sorts of funding for health needs is an organization called NAMI, which is the National Association of Mental Illnesses. It's actually a grassroots organization. And so everybody who works there is actually a person who also participates in services themselves. This is not people who are top downing it. This is just everybody has some sort of mental health need and they're advocating and they're doing work. So that means that this is totally grassroots if you go here and find a resource here. But if you're nervous about going to therapy, and this is actually not unusual, I'll answer this question and then I'll let y'all be free to explore if you want to go get therapy. If you're nervous about getting therapy, two things that I would mention to you. Let me get rid of this banner here. Is, first of all, ain't nothing wrong with asking for help at least a couple of times, right? So something that's actually really interesting about therapy, if you go and you do work for you, if you come from a family that generationally has a lot of struggles, the healing work that you do in that room, what you learn about yourself, your spirituality, your ability to cope, your strong emotions, your trauma, is almost certainly going to be related to the other people in your family and what they've been through. So if you come from a family that seems to be struggling, hurting inside, in pain, what I can tell you is that if you work just on you, if you give yourself enough permission to say, I deserve to ask for help and get it, it will start with you and ripple out into your family members. If families change, if one person in a family change, it forces change amongst the other members. Families are inherently connected. This is more so true in areas that are poor, areas that are have immigrant communities, areas that have people of color and Black people in them. That's even more true in those areas. And so when we say that healing starts with one person, I'm talking about healing of families, which means healing of communities, which means healing of whole population of people. But it starts with people acknowledging that there is both intergenerational issues and trauma and individual stuff that happens to us that there's no shame or blame in not being able to really deal with, right? And so if you want to prevent harm, if you want to make sure that you don't get into a relationship where you are being guided by your fear and your paranoia, if you want to make sure that you can actually dream for yourself and feel comfortable in your relationships with even your children or your parents or anybody, I would suggest that it's worth taking the risk. And I always say, feel the fear and do it anyway. It ain't nothing wrong with being scared. There is something wrong with not doing it anyway. And a lot of people will think on do they want therapy, and something like the Trevor Fund, which is a suicide prevention organization that does a lot of great work. There's even hotlines that you can call first. If you want to go on BetterHelp.com, I mean, I didn't list that, but if you want to go on BetterHelp and start texting with somebody first, start texting with them. What also can be an easy first step is for you to step into your relationship with a higher power, with an ancestor, with God, and at least start talking to them about your problems and your stress. And then when you start to hit a wall and you really feel like you need some guidance or your negative thoughts are coming up too often, reach out for help. The worst thing that can happen is you don't like the person and you don't need to go back. But therapists, just like friendships, you can have a lot of bad therapy experiences. And so I wouldn't encourage you to give up on the whole process. If you've been on a lot of bad dates, then you deserve to at least go to a couple bad therapists and see who's going to work for you, because somebody really can. And hopefully when you feel seen and heard and important, then you'll have the safety to actually explore some of the stuff that's a little uncomfortable and shameful and feels bad and that you criticize yourself for. And I'm telling y'all, there is a possibility of a life where your thoughts and your feelings do not disrupt your whole experience of being able to connect or feel successful or love yourself. That you can have peace, but it is not natural for us people, right? Pre-colonial world people. It's not natural for us to do it alone. What seems to be the human condition is it helps us a lot to do it in village and community and relationship. And if you don't have those things, especially not good versions of those things or skilled versions of those things, then you're at a deficit in terms of your village. So this is just a wisdom community. This is just a place to find resources. You don't need to have it be just your therapist. If you want to go to a therapist and go to a priest and go to a sister circle with your friends, that's cool with me. These are just resources to help you get started if you want to go into therapy while you're in the process of getting some support and finding some safety. So I always pull a tarot card at the end of these. And so we're going to see what lessons we got coming from the ancestors and from the universe for you guys before you go, about you seeking help in therapy and funding for therapy. I mean, this is some pretty straightforward stuff. I'm shuffling. And so I pulled one of my favorite cards, which is the Fool card. I've pulled this before, y'all, and the lesson is almost always applicable. Trust your intuition. If you are scared to do something, but your heart is telling you and your body is telling you maybe you need to do it anyway, because that's going to be what's best for you, trust that. Trust yourself. If there's anything that you can learn before you step into a therapy room from me, it's that your feelings have functions. Try to honor that they mean something. And if you don't know what they mean right now, don't worry. The meaning will come. The Fool card tells us to trust our intuition, take risks, start new adventures. Maybe that new adventure for you is going to be therapy. Hopefully it's good therapy with somebody who sees you and understands you, because I love y'all and I hope for the best when you go into a healing space. I hope that's exactly what it is. So take care of you, and I will see you next week on an episode about how to make friends as adults, because, people always ask. So I'll see you next week here on Young Boss Media at 7:30.